Okay, good afternoon. We'll wait a few minutes to get going. Looking at a really, really good day in the market overall. The looking at what I have. So, to those following anything that I normally do, and I post some of these on my financial page, I like to buy and sell stocks that have been oversold or overbought, right? So, a lot of times on really good news, a stock overreacts and goes too high. On bad news, it drops too much and goes too low. And that's where I like to either buy or sell. And Dollar Tree, the Dollar Tree stores, announced last week that they were going to move many of their $1 items to $1.25, which is likely overdue. The stock went in that 105 range in the last few weeks to about 149 is the high. So I mean, just do some simple math there. You go from a dollar to $1.25 on most of your items. That's a 25% increase. The stock goes from 105 to 149, which is about a 40 something percent increase. That seems too high to me. So today, at around 143, I shorted it, which is basically betting the stock to go down. And it did exactly that. So today, the stock, right now, it's at 1.4. I don't know if that's true or not, unless it's just dropping, just a massive drop after market. I don't know why, if that's accurate or not. The spread is, wow, it is a pretty big. Oh no, it's back up to 141. So something's going on there after market, but did pretty good on that trade overall. And I'm going to hold that for a few days. I think that drops to the 135 range or under, and I'll watch that. So just giving you some stock updates as I wait for people to log on. Not a great finish yesterday or last week to the market. A really good finish today. Kind of a bounce back after that COVID scare. And so, when COVID first happened in March of 2020, we saw stocks hit all-time lows, just absolutely collapse. And pretty much everything did. At that point, we didn't know what stocks are going to be reopening plays or closure plays. Closure plays, we're talking about stocks like Zoom, because everybody started using Zoom. Amazon, everybody started ordering from Amazon. The stocks that got killed are all the stocks, travel stocks, cruise lines, airlines, Uber, although Uber picked up based on food delivery. So we had these stocks that do well during COVID, then stocks are going to do really well during the reopening. And then Friday, we had this kind of scare of, where can COVID go? And so there's this sell-off on especially those reopening stocks. It looks like today, Biden spoke. He gave a speech basically saying, we should be concerned, but we're not expecting any more shutdowns. We're not expecting to shut off travel to more countries. It seems like we get ahead of this a little bit earlier. But that said, still saying get your vaccinations, get your booster shots if you can get them, and wear a mask if you so choose. So that's where we stand there. If you're in Brantford and you've been around for the weekend, we had a great parade last week. I hope everyone had a great Thanksgiving. And it's really good to be back. I will make it a point to try to get on every day. My goal for the new year will be consistency, to get on Monday through Thursday and post far more articles on Brantford 7, soon to be called Atticus News. Okay, so from a topic to talk about today is really a broader question of economic development. But over the weekend, we posted that there's a few things that came out. Home Restaurant posted they're having an issue with their landlord. They may be forced to move to start the year. Darbar had an issue with their landlord during COVID. They're forced to move. They're moving to the Asagio location. If you don't know where some of these places are, you can post in the comments. We'll answer those. But if you're from Brantford, you'll know most of these things. At the same time, I got a few text messages last week that a large residential property owner, I want to find the exact message here so I have it right, but had sent a letter out to, I would say, 70, 80 apartment dwellers. And it basically says, as you know, we've maintained rent levels with no increases for many years, only a very modest increase last year. After discussion, factoring the rental data in Brantford and other cost factors, we decided to increase rents to bring them in line with the current market. And so we're seeing rents increase basically 60% in some of these places. That's a large number of rents in Brantford going up 60%. And so it's interesting. We have successful restaurants debating with their landlords. We have a lot of tenants now going through this issue where landlords are jacking up rents. I mean, if you suddenly were paying $1,200 in rent in November, and you got a notice saying January 1st you had to pay $1,800, that can make a significant difference for a lot of people. That's not an easy thing. And so that's what's happening in Brantford. And one of the reasons this is interesting, besides being of value to discuss it, is that during the election, we heard that we desperately needed economic development in Brantford. And this is evidence that that's not necessarily the case, that we have a very strong level of economic development. But these are some of the repercussions of what happens when you have a strong economy. And we've talked about economics here before. When we talk about a strong economy, we're talking about the movement of money. People are spending, right? There's people have money to spend. They're spending the money. There are people taking them. They're supplying goods. On a national level, we have some issues with our supply chain, right? Because we had to shut down for a year. We have issues with China. We're not getting as much product in. Shortage of supply increases prices. You have drastic inflation. That's happening on a larger scale. But in Brantford, unlike some of the political claims we've heard, there is a massive demand to be in Brantford. There's a significant demand for commercial space and residential space in Brantford. There's a lot of people who want to be here. And we hear politically, we need a full-time economic development coordinator. We need to focus on economic development. We focus on bringing business here. That's not really how business economic development works. Put very simply, economic development is an attempt to increase demand. That's all it is. We want to attempt to have more people at restaurants, buying clothes at stores, more people that want to be in the center of town, more people that want to live in Brantford, more people that want to buy houses in Brantford, more people that want to attend Brantford school systems. That's what we're trying to do with economic development. And you don't do that by going out and finding a company to come here. You do that by creating an economic platform, whether it's through taxes or tax abatement can be, or just such a great quality of life that people want to live here and people want to start their business here. However, what we're starting to see now is what can become the negative side of that is once demand is so high and people are willing to pay anything, you give landlords of commercial property and residential property or housing sellers huge advantages. And if you follow the real estate market in the last, 2 years, it was the time to sell. If you were looking at selling your house at all, you sold it and you probably got 10, 20, 30, sometimes 40% over asking over the actual value of the house because demand was so high. People had money. Brantford is a place people want to be. Now we see that trickle down. We see residential landlords saying, wait a minute, we have people that will pay $2,000 for a one-bedroom apartment. Before it was $1,200. So let's not renew people's leases at that rate, or maybe a $50 increase. And let's say either you pay this new rate or you're out, because they know they have people lining up to live in Brantford. So from an economic development standpoint, from a tax revenue standpoint, from a demand to be here standpoint, if you're opening a business on the town green standpoint, you are thrilled. If you live here and count on a tenant to keep your costs down, they suddenly have the right to say, I want to jack this price up to anything. The market rate allows me to charge far more, and I'll have a tenant within a month. There's no reason for me to hold on to you. And that's the negative thing that's happening. From a commercial standpoint, the landlord then goes and negotiates once a lease is done with a new tenant. So a restaurant can come to Brantford, can come to town, have incredible success, do a great job. Demand is there. People are out the door. It's great. They pay their rent. It's phenomenal. But once that demand is there, another restaurateurs see that, or there's a shortage of property, people want to be in Brantford, that landowner, that property owner now knows, man, I'm getting $4,000 for that building. I can get $6,000. So you go to that restaurant owner whose prices are based on paying $4,000 for rent and say, listen, you either pay this new number or you don't. But if you don't, we're not giving you your new lease. We want you out of here. We know we're going to have somebody new. So when you have weak economic development, all the power is in the tenants. That business owner renting space, that residential renter, they have all the power. Economic development is not good. That property owner just wants to fill a space. We'll give you a good rate. We'll give you good terms. We'll fix the building. We'll upgrade it for you. Whatever you want to get them in there. When economic development is really good, when the demand is high, those property owners have all the power. And so they can say anything they want to those tenants once the leases are up. And so it's a very difficult situation. We yell about economic development, but that's what happens. One of the things that happens is housing costs go up, rental costs go up, the cost to open a business goes up. When the cost to open a business goes up, what happens? The cost of goods goes up. What they're selling goes up. We combine that with the cost of goods, even without strong economic development in Brantford, going up because of the supply chain issues that we're seeing nationally. So you're seeing inflation be higher. You're seeing living in Brantford get higher. That's all good from a tax standpoint, from an economic development standpoint. It's not necessarily good for those in the lower economic brackets. Living here costs more, eating out costs more, groceries cost more, because that grocer and that tenant has higher, not just cost of goods, but cost of rent. All the power is with the property owner. So over the weekend, we saw a few things. Darbar, which had, and during COVID, told us, they publicly posted they were going to have some significant issues paying their rent, likely paid only a portion of it. And then suddenly they're moving to the Asagio building. So likely made a deal there. That's a good example of supply and demand. The Asagio building is a rough building, and it kind of took a while to fill in. So that landlord did what they can to get Darbar in there. Home is another example of this as well. So he posted, I want to read this directly so I get it right, but I'll read the, when I say he, I'm talking about Jared Schulafan, who's a great guy, done a really good job, and actually does a lot in the center of town and a lot to promote other businesses around town. And I'll read this. It goes, "It's with a heavy heart we have to post this information as news about Home has slowly been shared over the last few weeks. We want our amazing customers, our incredible community Brantford, to hear the whole story directly from us." And in fairness, Jared did call me and tell me some of the stuff behind the scenes as well. So coming from a place of knowing what's going on. It says, "Due to ongoing disputes with our landlord, Home will be looking for a new place to call home. It's very important to us the situation be represented clearly. Please note this is not COVID related due to staffing shortage, supply issues, or any number of hardships that numerous restaurants have faced in the 19 months. It is due solely to the decision of our landlord to not renegotiate our lease. The good news is that we can safely say we'll be at our current location until at least the beginning of 2022. We do not know how far this can be stretched out, but intend to stay as long as we legally can. We are actively looking for a new location in the hope there will be no interruption in serving the wonderful community." Jared also owns a small consulting company that he'll be doing as well. And I think wisely, and it's the right thing to do, says, "In light of the uncertain nature of things, we will not be selling gift cards or booking private parties for any dates in 2022. We will have some opportunities to book events at other locations. We'll continue to serve the community. We'll be sure to keep everyone up to date through our social media pages." So, it's tough that we see restaurants that we know and love, and business owners that we know and love, and business owners that have invested in Brantford, have invested in the community, going through this stuff. It's a side effect of a very, very strong economy in Brantford, of a significant demand to be in Brantford. And that landlord, who I believe is out of Madison, has a ton of power because of that. And so, it's interesting. I like to talk about the political spin that we see from political parties and then the economic realities that are often opposed to those things. We hear about economic development all the time. We hear about we need to bring more restaurants and a more vibrant town center. We have an incredibly vibrant town center in Brantford. We have a lot going on in Brantford. So that idea politically of attacking the town center was nonsense. The other thing we hear all the time is we have to bring biotech to Brantford. We need more, that sort of thing. The problem with even that argument is that biotech, the nature of biotech is to get bought out. These companies are small research companies. They get large grants. Once that grant runs out, they're gone. They're hoping to get bought out and leave the area. So it's not always the most stable economic development. Right now it's good. It may not be in a year or 2 years or 3 years. This is the teetering act that is economic development. This is the balancing act is, hey, we want to create demand. We want people here. want restaurants to flourish, you do that enough, what happens is prices go up, the landlords have power, lease goes up, rents go up, and the prices that you have to pay as a consumer go up as well. We're seeing that with residential properties as well. It is getting very difficult to live in Brantford. And as we watch rents and houses approach that Guilford level, we still kind of create this chasm that we have in Brantford of trailer parks and low-end condos and then very high-end units. And now we're seeing rental. It was always those middle-class, lower-class rentals in the center of town, now becoming higher-end rental numbers. And so that is the downside of successful economic. You want this. So what you want to happen, this is a good thing. This is what economic development is. You're increasing demand for rents, demand for homes, demand for goods, demand for food out. But in doing that, you also give power to the landlords who can do anything with those rents and have complete power as long as there's people willing to spend money on them. So it's just interesting to look at that from a broader picture. Now we can go a step further. A lot of these residential landlords during COVID faced a significant issue. You had tenants, this is true, and this has happened in Brantford, who were allowed to not pay their rent due to COVID. Still got unemployment, plus $600 or plus $300, whatever it was for a year, whatever that was, still got their stimulus money. But many people, and we're not just talking about poor people, we're talking about middle-class people said, all right, I'm going to pay half my rent or not pay my rent because I can get away with it right now, still pocketed their unemployment money. There are businesses that pocketed PPP money and didn't pay their rent or paid a portion of their rent instead. So that tenant is now saying, wait a minute, I had to eat some of my tenants not paying rent. I had to eat some of my commercial tenants only paying a portion of that rent. And now I've got massive demand where I can make up that difference. If I kick out that current tenant, I'm going to do that. So that's the other end of this discussion of, wait a minute, the landlords are the ones who got killed during COVID. If you owned a house that you were renting out and that rent was paying the mortgage and that person said, I don't feel like paying this, you couldn't evict them during COVID. So you could have got stuck not getting money. You could apply for some funds. There's no guarantee you'd get those either. So now they're saying, wait a minute. There are people coming to Brantford that will pay $2,000 for a studio apartment. There are people that are coming to Brantford who will pay $2,800 for a one bedroom. There are people coming to Brantford that will pay $400,000 for a house that was $300,000 just a year ago. It's time for me to take advantage of that. It's time for it to make up for those things that I've lost during COVID. And we can understand that too. But there's all these sides to this issue that's happening right now. It's coming to a head now because these notices on rentals just went out, I believe, a week and a half ago. The issue with home in Darbar is happening now in real time. And so, yes, we want economic development, but there's a downside to this. And there's another side that happens. And it's one of those situations where you can see everybody, their point of view. I get that a tenant wants his rate to stay the same or close to it, right? They've been paying that for a long time. Maybe it goes up 5%, but a 60% raise is crazy. At the same time, I get that the landlord says, wait a minute, I've had 10 rental units. 3 didn't pay their rent at all during COVID. I've got to make that up. There's a huge demand. I need to strike while the iron is hot. So do you have a logical explanation for all these sides? But this is where politics doesn't really tell us the real economic story. It's easy to yell on a bumper sticker, we need economic development. We need more biotech. We need more people in the center of town. We have that. And the issue we're facing is all of the power now, economically, everything has gone in the favor of the property owners as opposed to the tenants. And Justin, how are you? You said also increase land value. Increasing land value if you own the property. That's great. If you own a house and land value has jumped up 20, 30%, congratulations. The problem is that tenant that during COVID either didn't pay their rent, didn't pay their full rent, that landlord now wants to make that value up. If you're a tenant, the property value doesn't matter to you. You're only there for the lease. So you have situations like in home or in Darbar where you have been here, Home took over a location and has built what essentially has been a landmark for the last decade in the town center. I go there on a regular basis. You kind of know everybody in there. It's kind of one of those, Tommy Sullivan's cheer, kind of place that you go in and it's a landmark. And God knows I always order the same thing. I get the patty melt and fries, but it's just that way. You go in, you see Jared, you see Steve behind the bar. It's the same people all the time. It's become that. Jared's also been instrumental in working on economic development in the town and working on events on the town green and getting the people on the town green working together. So when you're a tenant, you can come in, you can help, you can invest in economic development, but that economic development then may move against you when the tenant says, hey, thanks a lot. You created a great demand for that location. Now I can charge you whatever I want. And in his post, he said that the landlord wouldn't negotiate a new lease with him. The landlord may have 10 other people wanting to go in. That landlord, I believe, is a real estate agent or works in real estate. He may know that there's a demand for that space. And so that's the question. Bill, everyone loves home restaurant, great place, since the landlord won't agree on a rent price. How fast do you think another business will occupy that space? Denali went out prior to COVID, and the landlord did a wonderful deed letting Baca go in. It looks fantastic. If they did not allow Baca, it most likely would be vacant. Very true. So let's go back to the economic development aspect again, right? It's supply and demand, but there's supply and demand for some things. There's not significant supply or demand right now for clothing stores. Partially because, one, Amazon's done much of that, but two, there's supply chain issues. If you're a small business opening up any sort of clothing store or a store like electronics or things of that nature, you're going to have a hard time opening up right now because you don't know you can get goods, right? Food are a little bit better, but your food costs have gone up. But from a goods standpoint, to replace Denali, that's going to be a problem. Denali went out probably, it's interesting, had they stayed open, the demand for outside stuff skyrocketed during COVID. They may have done very, very well during COVID. So they may have closed a little too early. Yes, I think Vigliotti, I believe, is a landlord there, rented out to Baca, who did a great job with their showroom. But that's likely only there until a tenant does come in. I mean, I'm sure the Baca deal is either free or close to it, and at some point somebody will rent that space. But the real question is, and the question that you asked is, how long will we wait for somebody to be in that home space? Only the landlord knows that. He may have somebody lined up. Now, as a town, we may have something to lose here. So let's suppose home moves to the Yukiyama spaces opening up in the center of town, or let's suppose home moves there. Now, we still have home in the center. We have Archie Moore's on one side with Ashley's and Pasta Cozy and home and all those restaurants. It's a great thing to have in the center of town. But you probably, and here's the argument I would make to the landlord of home. He's also the landlord of a bunch of smaller spaces next to that. If you take home away, which is kind of the anchor there, once you get past common grounds, there's not significant things that go down there. Home being there probably helps the 5 or 6 other businesses that are on that strip. If you're a landlord, you may say, wait a minute, I don't want to lose home because I may impact the businesses and the viability of my other locations. So it may be smart for them to come to the table. And listen, I believe there's some sort of forced mediation happening from a legal standpoint on that. Maybe something happens, maybe something doesn't. I don't know. And there's more to that story. During COVID, home had their issues as well. So there must have been something worked out with regards to rent and percentage and all this other stuff. And I believe a person passed away and the son has taken over. There's a long story there. And, we don't know. As a landlord, they have every right to say, I don't want anybody in there. I want to make it my pool. They're a landlord. They can do whatever they want. But it's going to be unfortunate where Jared is a victim now of his own success. Jared, who has partaken significantly in growing economic development in that area, in hiring local people, in growing a brand in the center of town, and helping the businesses next to him. Because I know from personal experience, he's worked on that. I've had meetings with him in the first selectman's office on how do we get the town going in economic development wise. He's played a big role in those things. And now he's a victim of that increased economic development that he helped bring about in the town center. So hopefully this podcast brings a little attention to this. I have made some phone calls to landlords Hopefully, we'll have an article on that and we can talk about some of that issue. But the bigger issue is, and this is something we do on this podcast, what are the political claims and then what are the realities? It's easy. Every election, people say, I'm going to bring in economic development. Okay. I wish you well. Everybody says we need a full-time economic development manager. You don't need that. An economic development coordinator doesn't do much. Almost in any town doesn't do much. Brantford and Madison share an economic development coordinator because they don't do much on their own. What does something, what attracts people to a town is making that town attractive in many other ways. And what the Cosgrove administration has done, by the way, it's been bipartisan, has been a focus on economic development by focusing on the environment. We have trails and open space and parks and all those things happening. We're working now on fields. We're focused on quality of life. This is a town people want to live in. When you have a town that people want to live in, you increase demand to live here. When you increase demand to live here, you increase the cost to live here, the cost of apartments, of course, of houses. People who have money end up moving there. People who have money spend money at stores and restaurants. It's a cycle. But that successful cycle ends up hurting those on the lower to middle economic brackets. The people who were counting on a $1,200 single bedroom rent now are looking at $1,700 or $1,800 for a single bedroom rent. The family who needed a two-bedroom apartment for $1,800 are now paying $2,400, $2,500. We're seeing an increase in high-end apartments being built. The Days Inn facility, Maritoli's building over by across from the train station. Because that's to meet this demand. Brantford has become a destination for people. It's a place people want to live. And so housing is being built to match that. That's expensive housing. And so those that are making $40,000 or $50,000 a year, they're going to have a harder time finding a place to live. That could be a starting teacher. That could be a starting police officer. They're going to have a harder time to live. Now, there's a whole other part of this conversation that goes to affordable housing. I'll have that in another day because the law that we have on the books doesn't actually address affordable housing the way we can really address affordable housing if we look at this issue from an economic standpoint. That being said, for example, we give no incentives to private property owners to maintain certain rents. So this is why we have rent control, for example, in New York City. The reason we bring this up is because, yes, it's one thing to yell for economic development, and economic development on its face is very, very good. We want that. It helps us pay for schools because it increases tax revenue, increases property values. It brings in more money. It helps. That said, there are people who are going to pay the price. Some are going to be businesses that did not own the building. Some are going to be people in that middle class to lower class that are paying $1,000 to $1,200, $1,200 to $1,400 for a single bedroom, who suddenly the tenant has all the power. And he can say, you know what, I want to go to $1,800, I want to go to $2,000 because I want to maximize my revenue. They have every right to do that. We can understand it. But that's a side effect of a strong economy. That's a side effect of what's a strong economy? Strong demand. When you say to him, we're going to bring about economic development, what you're really saying is we are going to increase demand for our property and our services in our town. We want more people to buy stuff from here. We want more people to want to live here. You have a line of people wanting to buy stuff and a line of people wanting to live here. You increase economic development. More tax revenue, but there are prices to be paid, and that's what we're seeing now. We're seeing it with home. We're seeing it with Darbar. We're seeing it with many of these people who are renting units and got that notice that I read earlier. There's sometimes a tough lesson to learn from that. So it's just interesting to put in context when we hear it politically all the time. Now we get to see real time what the impacts of a strong economic platform are. Some people pay the price. Okay, that's my rant for today. I've always tried to take political issues and the political rhetoric we hear and look at that in real world situations. It's very easy for politicians to put stuff on a bumper sticker. But at the end of the day, issues are far more complicated. And you can ask yourself this question. Can you understand? We have residential tenants, residential landlords, commercial tenants, commercial landlords. Can you understand where each is coming from? Yes. I get where that tenant's coming from. They want to live in this town. They want to pay a reasonable rent. That landlord has been without some rents over the last 2 years due to COVID, and you have a market that is soaring. They're saying, I want to take advantage of that. You would do that too. Commercially, A business moves in and does well, and they invest in the local economy, they invest in downtown, they try to get things going, and then they see success, economic development grows. The landlord says, wait a minute, I'm going to have a greater demand for that facility, so I'm going to either increase the rent or find someone else to go in there. You can understand the viewpoints of all the sides. And that's why those issues, while politicians reduce it to a bumper sticker, are far more complex than just that bumper sticker, that slogan. I want to read Bill's comment. If the landlord forces home out and does not have someone in the line to occupy the space, I wish the town could double down on its property tax, forcing a good business out and leaving the building empty. There are not a lot of people going into the restaurant business. So one, obviously you can't do that. Okay, so you can't just double somebody's taxes. There would be a lawsuit immediately. But you still have to make sure they keep the building up. You still have to make sure it's presentable. There's that kind of stuff. There's new laws on blight laws. So there is some responsibility to keep up a building. Part of a landlord having a tenant is that the building is kept up. And you know what? Right now, there might be an increase in people going to the restaurant business. Part of what happened in COVID is people decided to many times change their life or become self-employed or try new things. So that, and I believe the landlord is in the real estate industry, they may know of more people who want to move in that space. So hopefully somebody sits across the room from somebody and says, wait a minute, it's in everybody's best interest to come to a reasonable conclusion here. If the rent goes up a small amount, so be it. But whatever has to be repaired in the buildings, whatever the negotiation has to be, it is in everybody's best interest that happens, unless that landlord has some tenant that wants to pay some new rent, or unless there's a personal vendetta. And unfortunately, when there's a personal vendetta, or the landlord doesn't like the tenant, or the tenant doesn't like the landlord, and I'm not saying this is the case in home, I'm just saying in general, that gives all the power to the landlord. If your lease is up in your home and you're renting a house or renting an apartment, and your landlord doesn't like you, you didn't get along with your landlord, there's nothing saying he has to renew that lease. You'd be smart to have, if somebody's paying and keeps it in good shape, to maintain that. But if he wants to say, no, I'll go 3 months and find somebody else, that he has a right to do that. And so in a strong economy, all the power goes to the landlords. Residential or commercial, in a strong economy, all the power goes to the landlords. If you want to have power in those circumstances, buy the property. Be Lenny's, for example, or The Stand, or the restaurants where they're owned. The person who owns it also has the restaurant there. You can't touch them. Or this is one of the benefits of buying a house. You have it. And Terrell, yes, I'm hoping home can stay as well. If it's not there, another location, but in the center of town. But it's unfortunate that anybody has to go through. The worst case scenario is a restaurant has to move, and then a landlord has to get another tenant, because all of them are going to be out money. It costs money to move, and for a landlord to bring in somebody new usually comes with a list of commercial modifications, construction modifications, heating, upgrades, new permits from town. So it would be nice if they can come to some reasonable accommodation and say, listen, everybody stay where you are. Let's work it out, shake hands, sign a 5-year lease, whatever it is, and walk away. It's almost always in everybody's best interest to make that work. Again, with all the power being in the landlord's hands, we don't know if he has something else waiting. And Darbar had to play that game. Darbar had to get out. They were there for years. As long as I've been in Brantford, Darbar's been there. I haven't gone there much. I mean, I did go there a few weeks ago. But they're going to go to Asagio. And, it's funny. And that building's been vacant for a little while, where Asagio was. But the owner of that building lives behind it. He may be far more reasonable being a Brantford resident, wanting a long-term tenant. And with that space being empty for a long time, some of that power transferred back to the tenant, right? He was looking for somebody. And when that location's a tough location, I think it's actually going to do, if Atlantic Wharf is ever built, that'd be a phenomenal location. But hopefully it works for everybody. But supply and demand. When people say, I want more economic development, what they're saying is, I want to create more demand for our town. If they're successful in doing that, and Brantford has been successful in doing that, a lot of positives. more tax revenue, more businesses, a thriving town center. And God knows, if you've been anywhere near the town center any summer night, we have a thriving town center. The downside of that is all of the power is then with landlords. And that has some negative consequences at times. We're seeing it here in Brantford, and it may result in a change of the landscape in the center of our town. Okay, we'll be back tomorrow at 4 o'clock. And that's it for now. If there's any questions or comments or things you'd like me to discuss or research, please send them in. And we'll be back tomorrow at 4 o'clock, guys. Until then, have a great night.